I want to start with running. You have this great passage in your book where you said you were talking about learning a vital lesson of running, which is the weather is always good enough to run in it, and there's always a spot to go. I'll run in 100-degree heat with ice tucked in my hat when it's 15 below with Vaseline rubbed on my nose. I'll run in hail and in dust storms. I'll run circles around a driveway or a parking lot if that's the only place to go. A cop in New Hampshire once called my running to a halt, thinking I was a prison escapee. I've run through Times Square at midnight. I once ran around Las Vegas in shorts and a ski jacket because I forgot to bring a t-shirt. I've run to black tie events with my tux in my backpack and changed in the men's room. I've jogged to airports and headed right to the security line. So I'm curious, it could be one of those, but I'm just curious, what is the craziest run you think you've ever done?
Like the craziest as in like
just like weirdest or whatever you take, wherever you take crazy.
I think
most improbable, maybe.
The most improbable. I mean, probably the weirdest is like running a 40-mile loop starting at 4 a.m. out, Flatbush Avenue, just around Brooklyn. But that was also like cool. It wasn't like the kind of thing that nobody would do. I think the dust storm run was like maybe the craziest because it was in Abu Dhabi and I was there. It was a lead up to a marathon where I cared a lot about how I did and really focused workouts. And it was one of those days where, I had so many meetings and so many panels I had to moderate. I had like an hour free and I think I had to do 6 by a mile. And right when I started, it was like, okay, there's a dust storm starting. And the way the dust storms work is they like start and then they stop. And I remember like just like being desperate to keep my like mile paces. I was trying to run like 540s or whatever, try to keep them on while that's falling. So like any rational person, I don't know, maybe you would have like delayed it to the next day, but I was like locked into that schedule and I had to do it. So that one was up there. The ski jacket one was ridiculous because it was a day in Vegas and it was last year. And it was in the winter and I was talking to some of them and maybe it was like around CES. And it was a weird day where I had like 30 minutes free, right? It was like schedule was packed. It might have been one of those days I flew in the morning and flew out in the evening. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna like get my run in these 30 minutes that are free. And I remember going up, opening my suitcase and there's like no shirts. And I was like, oh my God. And I was like, well, I don't have time to buy a shirt because I only have 30 minutes and I got to get a few miles in. I was like, I'll go shirtless. I'm like, well, I can't go out of the hotel if I'm shirtless. I was like, all right, I got the ski jacket. And so I put on my black, like big puffy ski jacket because it had been cold in New York. It was like 80 degrees. I'm running around the Sphere in a ski jacket. So that was a weird one.
Oh my God. How did you do on the mile repeats in the dust storm?
I didn't do that well. Were not great. They were not great, but I did well in the marathon afterwards.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you have a bandana or goggles or something?
I can't quite sure, but I think I kind of like did this with my shirt. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, this gets into something I want to talk to you about, which is you seem to get a prolific amount of stuff done, and we'll get into the productivity side of that, like how you actually do that. But you also that also seems like to get all the things done that you do get done, or to sort of do what you're talking about there, which is make the most of a less than ideal situation. I think you need like a relative amount of, or not even relative amount, a large dose of unflappability.
Yeah.
And this is something you talked about on the Rich Roll podcast. You said like, you've just learned you do the best you can. You try and stay in that moment. If it doesn't go well, you try to do better in the next moment. And I think that's a really interesting mindset. And so I'm curious how you came to that, how you've always had it, how it's changed over time. I just think it's a really interesting attribute.
Okay, so there are a couple of theories, right? So I definitely did not have it in my 20s, right? And I feel like if I believe anything, right? And if I believe there's anything that's like core to my work, it's that you go and you like do the best you can at the thing you're supposed to do now. And you just have faith that even if it kind of felt terrible, like it did get you closer to the goal you're trying to get to, right? And you spend an hour working on an essay, right? Or you spend an hour preparing for the board meeting. And even if you feel like you've just confused yourself, you've actually made progress, right? And that I completely believe. And so once you believe that, then you can like allocate your time towards what are the most important things to be doing right now and just have faith that you're making progress towards them. I didn't have that in my 20s. In my 20s, I was more like, I'm going to get this done and I'm going to like write this amazing story. And I was like a little more, I didn't have that kind of stoic, I'm just going to go and do it. And I had to like, and what I don't know is when I got it, right? And I don't know whether I developed this theory through running, right? And just like running all the time and like seeing how the training affected me. I kind of feel like I might have gotten it by, I wrote this book about Paul Nitze, my grandfather, and George Kennan, was tracing America through the Cold War. Both of them kind of had this view, particularly Nitze. I kind of think it came about from like studying my grandfather as part of writing a book. And then part of it was, getting sick and recovering and like you're trying to live life once you've sort of been to the precipice. So all those factors get together. And then like the efficiency thing, I know where this came from. You have kids, right? And like you want to keep doing stuff. Like there are two ways of looking at a day. One is like the day extends to whenever I want it to end, right? And therefore I can do whatever I want. Like this is how we think about like, I'll just stay up all night if I need to, right? Think of children and you're like, all right, I'm going to have 2 hours to sleep, right? Between like 9 and 11, right? And I'm going to get everything I can do done before 9 so I can go to bed at 9 and sleep until 11 because otherwise I'm cooked, right? And once you have kids, you realize that just like the amount of time you have in your life is gone, right? So you better like be super efficient with it.
Yeah, I don't have kids, but I can imagine how that would be. But to that end, like how do you have to draw from somewhere in your life, right? What are the things you sacrifice, you feel like, to be so dialed in?
Oh, that's a good question. So, well, you sacrifice a little bit of like your dreaming, right? Like you sacrifice a little bit of like, maybe there was something about Nick in his 20s who you can imagine a thing that you can't imagine. Like maybe if you aren't always mind wired to your to-do list, maybe there's, a little more freedom. There's some things that I've cast to the side, right? I used to play guitar a lot more than I play guitar. I used to like go out a lot more, right? I used to, I pretty much go to bed the same time every night. I don't go to a lot of like work parties. There's a lot of social stuff that I've kind of put to the side. And you just, you make a trade-off, right? If you like, I care a ton about being a good dad. I care a ton about doing well at my job and care a lot about being a really good runner. You put those things together and not a ton of extra time after that. I also love to read, right? So you throw that in there too. And like, boom, now you're kind of in trouble.
Yeah. I want to go back to the thing you said about like, you have to trust and have faith that you're making progress, even if it doesn't feel like. That's a really interesting insight. Cause I, as a writer myself, like you could spend a whole hour writing and rewriting a sentence, right? And then you get, and so that does require like, okay, I got something done. Like, do you have that feeling you walk away and you're like, nothing got done there? Or you just kind of like, I did make progress. It just may not look like what my conception of progress.
Maybe the latter, right? So I was actually working on a short essay yesterday and I was on a flight, weirdly from Las Vegas. It's like a 4-hour flight. And I spend the first 2 hours and like literally the thing got worse, right? And it was just like, even if I'd fed it into ChatGPT would have said it's bad. I'm like, ChatGPT it's bad.
I don't know. It's pretty sycophantic. It would be like, I like what you're doing here, Nick.
You're on the right path, Nick. Let's sharpen it a little bit. So I spent 2 hours. I just I was frustrated and I stopped. And I was like, you know what? Those were 2 hours well spent. Like this is like the most important thing to do today is to like finish this essay or finish a draft. And then I kind of went away and I like worked on something else. Then I came back to it and like took me like 15 minutes and I had something that was pretty good. Right. And I like, there must have been there was some like sort of, it was almost like the casserole was cooking, right? I just couldn't tell. And it was or it's like how, when you're like watching a construction project, right? And you're watching somebody build something, it like looks like it's getting worse all the time, or it looks like it's not even like remotely getting closer to done. And then boom, presto, it's done. But what's happening is that there are all these things in the process towards completion that take place that are hard to notice. And like mentally, that must have been happening to me as I was working on this essay yesterday. That lesson I kind of learned through being a musician, where I remember somebody saying this to me. I was 15 years old and this has really stuck with me. I was like, man, I practiced guitar. I went away for Thanksgiving and I came back. I was like, I practiced 8 hours every day and I'm not any better. And my friend, who was a year older, therefore much, much wiser, was like, no, man, you are. He's like, you can't hear it, but you are, right? If you've practiced 8 hours a day for all Thanksgiving, like you're definitely better. And I like that stuck with me. And I've held on to it.
You have this other great sort of, I don't know what you'd call it, I guess maxim, a Nickism, but you said in your book, you write time spent fretting about a task is always better spent doing the task. I think that's so true. Again, really hard
I
to
like you pick that up.
yeah, really hard to like do though. And I'm curious because I forget if it was a podcast I listened to or somewhere else, but you were talking about trying to impart this lesson to your kids, like the importance of minimizing the time of thinking about doing something and having anxiety about it and maximizing the time of doing it. And is that something you can impart to them, or is that something you kind of have to learn through experience?
I've been unsuccessful in imparting it.
Okay.
I mean, my kid will come down, right? And it's like 7:30 and like he has to leave for school at 8:15 and he's like, I've got my homework at that time. I'm like, okay, maybe not. But like, let's try it. Let's see what you can get done. No, there's still, let's like see what we can get done in the next 10 minutes. And like, it's probably like 15 minutes of homework, right? And eventually like he gets it done and does it. And the kid's, amazing and gets his homework done all the time. But like, there's all of this angst and it's like, why don't you start doing it? And that's a really like, it's an important lesson. And it also like the skill you cultivate once you know that matters is like the on switch, right? Like, okay, now I'm going to do this right now. Like, you know what I'm not going to do right now? I'm not going to check my email. I'm not going to like clean the dining room table. I'm not going to like call this person. I'm just going to start the thing that matters, right? And I'm certainly not going to complain about it. I'm just going to do it, right? Or I'm going to try to do it. That's a really important life skill.
Yeah, you talked about that's important. I think even in like playing guitar, or that it's the idea of presence in some way, or even absorption, right? I feel like is what that really is.
Yeah, and I talk about there's a particular scene where this like, I'd started learning this skill, but I learned it in part from watching David Remnick, who's like the world's most efficient person, who manages to run the New Yorker, host his podcast, and then write these incredible essays. And he'll just say, okay, I'm going to write this essay by Friday. And you're like, you're going to write 8,000 words by Friday? And he's like, yeah, I'm going to go close the door and I'm going to go write the essay. And you're like, wow. And then he, opens the door and it's Friday and he's written the essay. And, the Boston Marathon bombing happens and I was the editor of thenewyorker.com. And David comes by my office, like, you got to write about this. I was like, no, I've been doing all this other stuff. Like, I got to like get these writers. Like, we're trying to find Murakami, and he's like, Nick, what are you talking about? I was like, well, I got this thing and I got it. And he's like, stop. It's like, this is what's going to happen. He's like, I'm going to go and you're going to put down your phone. And then I'm going to close this door. And then in 1 hour, I'm going to come back and I'm going to open the door. And what's going to happen when I do that is you're going to hand me your story. And I was like, okay, on it. Right. And then like, turns out I could write it in an hour. And you just needed to like stop being a bozo. And so that's a really hard skill to learn. It helps when you're observing, greatest journalist of our generation, and he's like giving you instructions and modeling it for you. But it's a lesson that anybody can learn.
Yeah, I think the way you characterize that in your book was like the best time to do something important is usually right now.
Yes,
and that's so true, right? Yeah.
I mean, I had that same fact on the airplane yesterday, where I was like, there are all these things I need to do. Like all these people have written like really nice Instagram stories about the Atlantic excerpt. I should get back to them. And I was like, but wait, I have this important thing I have to do. I was like, how about I follow my own advice and do that important thing, right? And like close everything else, close the browsers. And I often set a timer, right? And I'm like, for the next 30 minutes, I am going to only do the important thing. And when that timer goes beep, then I can consider like checking, right? But not until the timer goes beep.
Yeah. Can you explain, if you still have it, the way you organize your work life with sort of the Trello board?
Yeah.
Because I think that would be interesting for people to hear.
Yeah, I could put it up on the screen, but it has like a bunch of HR stuff on it. So my Trello board has like 5 categories that matter. So the category on the left is now. And that is like, what am I going to do at this very moment? It usually has 3 things in it, right? The next category is today. What are the things I'm going to do today, right? Then it has soon. And those are like, what are the things that I like generally have to do? So a new task comes up and I'm not sure if I'm going to do it today or tomorrow. I put it in the soon. The next, this is what's interesting, is the most important things today. And that's 5 things, no more. And these are the things that I'm like genuinely going to do well at today. And so I kind of like in the morning, what I do is I get up and I look at those 5 things from yesterday and I think about what the 5 things are today, right? So today, like a really important check-in with somebody on my team. And I had to like really be present, have really thought through like what it is that I need to be providing him and what I should be talking to him about. Like that's definitely one of the most important things. And I don't want to just reach the point of the day where we're having the check-in and then I'm winging it. For the other check-ins, I can wing it, right? But this one I want to like, this is important, right? And what I've like, and so once you do that exercise in the morning, okay, the check-in is going to be one of the 5 important things, right? And like, the way getting these books shipped to these people, which is like a slightly bureaucratic task, like that's actually important to do today. And then other stuff is like not that important, and you either get it done or you don't get it done. But I always try to get those 5 things done and focus on those. Like, so today, like I also have a board meeting on Monday, right? I need to like actually do a bunch of focused prep for the board meeting. And so it then provides this forcing mechanism. You're looking at the Trello board, what you should do today. And you're like, oh, wait, haven't done the board prep, right? So you get on it.
And then you're now, the 3 and the now, is that just like, those aren't things you're necessarily getting done today. They're just sort of the big umbrella.
No, the now is like literally, that is what I am doing. Like I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to move it off the Trello board, and then I'm going to do this, and move it off the Trello board.
Okay.
So,
okay. And then do you time block out your day?
I have a pretty tight schedule. There's not a ton of free time. Just, you get all kinds of meetings and stuff. So, but I do look and I'm like, okay, so I have like 2.5 hours that are unaccounted for today. So, all the stuff in this Trello board, you kind of try to squeeze in those 2.5 hours. Like you do the best you can, right? And you have like a 20-minute subway ride and you're like, amazing. Now I can catch up on my email, right? So,
you also talk about in the book about your non-goals.
Yeah, a non-goal is actually great, right? And so a non-goal is like, this is a thing that is important and I'm not going to do it because it's not important enough to do. I often give an example, like a non-goal is like setting a long-form video strategy for the Atlantic, right? There's probably a way to do a long-form video strategy that is effective and good, but it's not important enough to spend time on than the other stuff I have to spend time on. Right. Mm-hmm. Like quadriceps strength training, like that would be great, right? Flexibility, that'd be great, right? But these are non-goals. And so what a non-goal does is it tells you this is an important thing that you're not going to do. But then it also sets a floor because it means that there's nothing that is less important that you can do, right? I am already not doing strength training for my legs because I decided I do not have time to do strength training for my legs. So anything I'm going to do for training better be more important than that, right? And so it's a super useful heuristic for figuring out your like larger strategy goals or like what you're going to do. And then the other like component part of it is subtraction. And so when I'm running and training, I try to have this rule that you only do one new thing a week, right? So let's say you've added, last week I did a tempo run and a long run. This week I've done a tempo run, a threshold run, and a long run, right? I'm not going to add like a barefoot run. I'm not going to add a 12-mile at, whatever the workout is. You're going to do like, or I've added hill runs, right? Like you only add one thing in a week to your training. And then you also try to wipe out stuff that like doesn't matter, right? So early in a training cycle, like I'll do like a bunch of like push-ups and planks, or maybe I'll be riding the exercise bike. And then eventually it's like, okay, enough of that stuff, right? Like now I'm spending enough time running that I shouldn't do these other things.
Just reflecting on some of the stuff you said, it feels to me like I think one thing that people struggle with is this ability to let go of stuff. Like you're talking about subtraction or even just non-goals, like being like, I want to do that, but I'm not going to do it. I mean, I think this was the sort of the brilliance behind Oliver Burkeman's book, like 4,000 Weeks. If you read that, just like people really struggle to like let go of the idea they can do it all. And it seems like you've really reached a, like, not just peace, but like the knowledge of like, you can't, like you have to let go of things in order to do the things you are able to do.
And I think take a certain pride in it. People are like often are like, what's the best TV show you've watched recently? I'm like, nothing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wait, what? I'm like,
yeah.
It's someone, I don't watch a lot of TV.
Yeah.
Nothing against it. I wish I could, but it's not, it's sort of a non-goal.
And then do you struggle with like, cause one of the, I think themes running through your book is like, you can be, I think would you describe yourself as intense, or there's like a level of intensity to what you do?
Yeah, definitely.
And then you're talking about, you have a 20-minute subway ride. Can I get stuff done? Do you have sort of like circuit breakers when you're just like, I'm overloaded, or like, I know I'm doing too much and I take a step back, or how do you navigate that feeling?
I don't have that happen very often. I mean, I do. I think partly I don't reach that state because I run every day, which is a form of relaxation. And I spend a lot of time like every day, like playing with my kids, right? And like, go out and wrestle and play catch. Like there's all of this, I'm very focused in the time where I'm at the office, or, if I'm not with my children, or but I get tired. but I don't think I have like a circuit breaker thing. It's always, I've never, like people are always like, I'm overloaded. I just need to relax and watch a movie, right? Or, I really need to decompress, or I need to unplug for a week. And like, I don't have that need, for better or for worse.
Have you taken a vacation? Because I interviewed you once for GQ, and you said I don't think you'd taken a vacation at that point.
So that's funny. I take vacations all the time, right? And then I like take the kids cool places. I mean, usually as soon as they go to sleep, I'm working though, right? I mean, I'm not like what I haven't done is taken a period where if given a free hour of my own, I wouldn't spend it like making sure I was caught up on all my work. And like, and the other thing is the last few years, if I'm not like, if I've taken a vacation from work, I've like taken the kids somewhere, if I have free time, I'm reading the book. No.
Yeah.
So, like I relax a lot, but the way other people think of, I just went to the beach and I did nothing, right? That's infrequent.
I want to transition to running a little bit because I want to make sure we hit that.
Yeah.
As a way to do that, I know you spend a lot of time in this book talking about how sort of the running and in your work and life in general have these sort of nice parallels. So I'm curious what work has taught you about running, or running has taught you about work, just any sort of lessons that you feel like straddle both of those spheres.
There are lots of them. One that I like, and this is one I try to convey to people on my staff is, to get faster at running, right? Or they get like really fast. You have to run at speeds that are extremely uncomfortable, right? You don't get faster by going out there and running like 7 happy miles every day, right? Like you go out and you run 7 miles a day, which feels great. And you talk to your friends, like that's cool. And you'll get a little better over the course of a few months. But you're not going to get really fast. Like to get fast, you have to like get to the point of pain, and you have to try to do things that you don't think you can do, right? And the same is kind of true at work. You have to like, it's not like everybody here at the Atlantic, like there are a bunch of people over there in the desk and they're like huffing, like hand bent over their hands and knees. But like, you have to set a goal that's uncomfortable, right? Like I'm going to get this thing, like I definitely can get this done in a month. Well, let's try to get it done in a week. And I try to convey that. I mean, it's something I definitely believe about work. It's a hard thing to convey, but it's something that I can certainly apply to myself. And I would like to be able to better apply as a leader and as a manager, right? Like just, you have to you have to go into real debt from time to time. Another one, I mean, this is one that I talk about in the book, pretty deep and profound, is we don't actually know our limits, right? We think there's some, in running, there are performance limits, right? Like no one's going to run 3-minute and 30-second mile, but like, can someone out there maybe who's running 5:30s, could they run a 5? Could they run a 4:50? Could they run a 4:40? Like you sometimes don't know. And so, I had an experience and I read about it in the book. It's similar to something Alex Hutchinson writes about in his book, wonderful book, Endure, where I was early in my career as a runner. I just joined after being cut from the basketball team. And I was running 11:30 for 2 miles, which whatever. And I thought that was as fast as I could go. Like I was so tired at the end of every race. And maybe I was running 11:40 and thought I could go 11:30. And then I get entered in this, in the championships, and I don't know the size of the track, and I can't quite tell how fast I'm going. And they're calling out splits, but they don't make sense. And then I run a 10:48, and it's like, what? Right? I could never have conceived that I could have done it. And in fact, I would not have been able to do it had I known how fast I was going. But I didn't know it, and so I just did it. And a similar lesson where like you would have thought I would have remembered that, but through my 30s, I didn't think I could break a 2:40 marathon. And then I run a 2:39. Let's go. And then I go back and I'm running 2:45s, 2:46s, and then boom, presto, my training changes and I run a 2:29. And like obviously, in my 30s, I could have run faster than that. It's not like I was at my physical peak at 44. I just didn't realize I could go that fast. I didn't train to run that fast. And so you have to forget your limits.
Do you have ways of working that into your training at all, in terms of like, I'm just going to go out today, not have the watch or like have the watch, but not look at the splits and just be like run at a pace that feels comfortably hard and see what I run, or no?
So I do it, yes, but not that way. I do it in the, like what I do is when I'm beginning a training cycle and when I'm like, my speed is trash, I will run workouts or like run a mile, but I won't time it. And the reason I don't time it is that I'll run it as hard as I can. I don't want my body to associate a really hard mile with like whatever it is, like a 6:05, you know? So it's almost like I'm trying not to like create the sort of the mental memory of a slow mile time. And so you get the benefit of that mile workout, which is, I ran a mile at a heart rate of whatever, 145, like near my max. And I went however fast I did, but I didn't time it. Now, maybe I'm making a mistake because maybe I'm going faster than I think, but basically I just don't want to like lock into my body kind of a reference that is, inappropriate, not inappropriate, that is suboptimal.
In the book, you have this really interesting description where you say you think of your brain as a thermostat, combining hundreds of factors into a should we make Nick hurt score, which is a great way to conceptualize this. And when the score is too high, you say they fire up the pain furnace. So yeah, I mean, this is so interesting. We did our last episode, it came out yesterday on fatigue, this whole idea of like the central governor theory of fatigue, where like your brain stops you before your body does. And that's essentially what your very evocative metaphor is illustrating. How has knowing that changed like how you think about managing pain when you're racing or when you're working out?
So it changes my training in that I try to make my body, I try to take every system in my body and stress it more at least once during training than I'll stress it on race day. And so you want to they're all like your gastric system, your quadriceps. You want to like make your body hurt by running down a mountain really fast so that when you're running down the bridges in the New York Marathon, your legs aren't like, oh my God, like how can I handle this, right? I had this feeling, it was super interesting. I was pretty sick the last couple of days. And I was off and I was running and I was like, wow, I can barely see straight, right? And I was like, I feel horrible.
Wait, you were still running?
Yeah. And I'm like dizzy. I wear a Whoop, right? And like he has your Whoop recovery score. And my Whoop recovery score is like 7 out of 100, then 8 out of 100, then 2 out of 100, and then 1 out of 100, right? So I've got like 1 out of 100 Whoop recovery score and I'm off running. And I was like, should I be doing this? I was like, you know what? This is actually useful training for the end of an ultra marathon because I kind of feel right now what I feel at the end of an ultra, which is like, I can't see straight and I want to vomit, right? And I was like, this is good. This is like good fitness, in part because you're giving a little memory to your brain that you can actually continue forward motion despite feeling this trash. And so like putting yourself in situations where this was kind of the genius of I didn't have this theory and I didn't understand it until a couple of years ago as I started to think through it all. But I think part of the reasons I did well as a marathoner is that I would run when I was you run at 5 in the morning, you haven't had breakfast, right? Or I would run like after haven't had a couple drinks the night before, right? I would even run sometimes in the evening after having a couple of drinks, right? And so like you're training your body to handle all of these systems, which kind of resets the thermostat so that when you reach that physiological state, this is the other advantage of like running when it's a blizzard or running when it's really hot. Your body is prepared for whatever temperature range it's in. So the way I kind of get the thermostat set higher so that the make Nick hurt furnace kicks in later is by training all of these like different systems as I go. How I use it in a race, I try to be aware of like what pain is central governor pain and what pain is actual pain. I was running yesterday. I was cramp. I was like, this is central governor pain. I was like, I kept running. I was like, oh God, this hurts. I was like, no, central governor pain. Like keep going. And I was like, oh man, Kate, this is not central governor pain. Like something's going wrong with my abdomen. So, it also just gives you a framework for understanding like what is real pain and what is not. I say this to I train my 11-year-old soccer team. This is actually really funny. And I'll go to their practices every Monday and they're a very intense soccer team. They're great. And they'll, run a mile. And the first time everybody got cramps. And I was like, guys, cramps are fake. Cramps are an illusion. They're not real. Now nobody gets cramps, right?
Wow. Okay.
And in fact, I didn't do it deliberately. I just said it to them because I actually think that most cramps are fake. And then like the other day, two of them are running, and one of them's like, I got a cramp. And the other goes, cramps are fake. And I was like, pretty like true, but like it's kind of true. It's kind of a central governor thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I'm like, I don't know what I'm training these kids in, but they're definitely getting faster.
Reminds me of remember the Titans? Denzel Washington's like, what is pain? Friend, bread. Yeah, well, this is. I want to keep pressing this a little bit because I think it's such an interesting. Even when I read the Wired article that you wrote when you first, that was when you broke 243.
2 years.
What was that?
Right.
Yeah, and you had this interesting moment. Where you're talking about, you got thyroid cancer. You had just run your fastest marathon ever. Then you come back and you beat it by 13 seconds.
Yeah.
And you have this interesting revelation in that piece, and it's in the book, of course, too, about like you wanted to match the person you were before you got thyroid cancer, and that will like helped you, but it also hurt you because it held you back from being as good as you could have been. And I think that's like really interesting, this idea of like being almost scared of your own potential or success. Maybe that's not what it was, but I'm just curious if you could say more about that.
No, this is literally why I wrote the book. Is this if there's one revelation that like made me think that there was a book worth writing, it was this. So I run a 243 marathon when I'm 30 years old, and amazing. I get diagnosed with thyroid cancer right afterwards. 2 years later, I come back. I've gone through 2 surgeries. I've gone through all this horrible stuff. I run a 243 marathon again, and I'm thrilled and elated. Okay, that's a very nice, happy story. The next 10 years, my teammates nicknamed me Mr. 243, right? There's some 242s, there's one 239, some 245, 246, but it like all averages out to 243. Then in my 40s, I go and I run 229, and I'm thinking like, doesn't make any sense. Like, how, like, it wasn't like I didn't train in my 30s. Like I tried really hard. It wasn't like I didn't push myself to the limit. It wasn't like I didn't eat kale. It wasn't like I didn't like do speed work, right? I just didn't run fast. So why is it that I was stuck? Like clearly I had the innate capacity to go so fast, and yet I was stuck at 243, and it just hit me like a thunderbolt, right? Oh, because at some deep level, all I wanted was to be as fast as I was before I got sick. And it was that revelation, because what that made me realize is what makes you fast or slow is buried deep inside and is interesting. And what makes you fast or slow isn't just like God gave you a bunch of genes, God gave you a certain amount of luck, and then you did your threshold workout with like a certain amount of effort, right? And you combine those 3 things, and like that's how fast you are, right? And this person was born with a VO2 max of 70. This person was born with a VO2 max of 65, and that's why they're faster. Well, actually, no. Like the reason I was slower than this other guy on my team was not that I had like a lower VO2 max or hadn't worked as hard the threshold. It was because I wanted to only be it made me realize like the way we run is so much more interesting than I thought. And like what determines how fast you run is so much more interesting than I thought. And that's what made me want to write the book.
Mm. Yeah, it's such a weird calculus, and it's so mental.
It's
right.
Mental.
It's yeah.
And like, I love. I mean, obviously, I'm not going to be a running coach, but like with someone like Magnus who understands this all, like how do you get the most out of your athletes, right? How do you figure out what's actually holding them back, right? And like, could anybody have figured that out about me, right? Like, how could anybody figure that out in my 30s? Could I have had a conversation when I was 36 and somebody was like, Nick, I think you're just trying to be as fast as you were before you got sick, right? And you could run a T25, right? I don't know, like maybe you could have unlocked something. I don't know.
Yeah. It's really interesting. This great image in the book where you talk about running a marathon. You have like 100 pennies and you need to figure out how to drop them so that you drop your last one as you're crossing the finish line. Where did that come from? And I'm curious if you have other thoughts like that when you're out there.
That what came to me from Brett Kirby. So he's the head.
Okay.
Yeah. He's like, he helped train Eliud Kipchoge. He's like a Nike Sports Science, Nike NSRL, Nike Research Lab. And he told me all kinds of really smart stuff. And I've ever since he told that to me, I've liked it, because it's it's a really good metaphor because you run a little fast and, suddenly you get to mile 8 in a marathon and you should have 90 pennies, but you only got 80 pennies, right? And then you're in trouble, right? Or you get to mile 22 and you only have 3 pennies, right? And
you also have that great image of imagining putting your pain in a wheelbarrow and like wheeling it away. That's fantastic too.
Yeah, that's part of the central governor thing, right? Is like, okay, this pain is illusory, right? Like, I know this pain is not real. I'm going to just take it. I'm going to move it away. I'm going to keep going.
Yeah. That's fun. That's a fun it's sort of a fun pain playground. I've done a few ultras and a handful of marathons, and to go out there and actually get to experiment with how do I acknowledge the pain, but slightly breathe in some space between the pain and the container within which I'm holding it is a really interesting thing to try to do.
Hard thing to do. And also you can't pretend there isn't pain. You can't pretend you can actually control it. And I've got a really good understanding of pain. I've got a really deep knowledge of it. I understand my body. And I ran a workout this morning at 5K at 6:30 pace. I couldn't go any faster.
Yeah. You brought up Brett Kirby. You interview, you weave in all these great stories of other runners in the book. I'm curious, it doesn't necessarily have to be from one of those runners. I mean, Brett Kirby's not one of those runners, but he was one of your coaches, Steve Fenley. I'm just curious, what is one of the lessons you find yourself you most hearing in your head or coming back to most often that you've gotten from someone we've run with or worked with or interviewed for the book?
Well, it's probably Finley. So he trained me from 2018 through my American record in 2021. And he trained me in 11 races, and all 11 I exceeded my expectations. And, the guy, he figured something out. And I remember interviewing him afterwards. He told me all these good things. He's like, I quickly realized, Nick, that if I gave you a speed workout and I told you to run 4x2 miles at 5:45, 5:45, 35, 5:30 with 3-minute rest, you would do it precisely, right? You would try to do it precisely. But if I gave you a long run and I told you to run 18 miles, you would always run more. And so then I would give you exactly the speed workouts I wanted you to do, and I would give you less on the long runs. I would know you were going to run 20, so I'd tell you to run 16. But the main thing he figured out was this thing that we started the conversation with, which is that he realized pretty quickly that this was never going to be the most important thing in my life. And so he could not give me a schedule that required me to make it the most important thing in my life. And so this was a contrast. I interviewed Vin Lanana, who was the coach at Stanford when I was there. And Vin, when we were talking, he doesn't remember me as a runner because I was a meaningless part of the team. But he made this point. He's like, everybody who ran for me had to be totally committed. And if they cared about academics and other stuff, that wasn't going to work. And so obviously, I was never going to give him the commitment. I loved being a Stanford student and all the other stuff. I was never going to give him the commitment he needed to give the commitment back to me that would have made me into the best possible runner. I was not compatible with the way he viewed running, which is he's there to get people who are fully committed and get the most out of them and create a national championship team. Finley had this different view, which is okay, his project with Nick is to look at how much Nick is willing to train. And it's not everything. It's not even that much, but get the most out of that and the time available. And so, there's 3 people from Nike who are working on my program, and they would argue should Nick work on shoulder mobility? And of course we're Nick should work on shoulder mobility. It's terrible shoulder mobility. If he fixed his shoulder mobility, he had better form. If he had better form, he'd run faster. And Steve was nope. Not going to fix Nick's shoulder mobility,
Yeah.
Not going to change Nick's form, right? Not going to we just don't have time for that. We're not going to add this to the program. Nope. We're not going to run 80 miles a week. We're going to run 60. And, he figured out, he basically through talking to me, he figured out the most I could do. And then he figured out how to get the most out of that. And, that meant that I never quit on the program. I never deprioritized it. And that was that was brilliant. And so I think about that a lot with different people I manage. How do I get the most out of them, right? Because the way you get the most out of somebody is not commit completely, right? The way you get the most out of them is actually understanding what they want, what they need, and the time they have.
Yeah, I like that. So, last question I'll ask you. New York's coming up next week. You're running it.
Sure
I'm
am.
running it way behind you.
You don't know.
But I'm curious either the best lesson the marathon has taught you or what you tell someone as advice for their first marathon.
I mean, it's an obvious lesson, but it's very hard, which is you really can't feel any pain or fatigue the first 10, 15 miles. And if you feel any, you have to go slower. And everybody, like, you know what you should do before you run the first marathon? Go back and open up last year's New York City Marathon and look at how many people ran the first half slower than the second half, because it's none of them, right? Everybody runs the first half faster. You have to remember that and just run like it is much better to run the second half faster and to be passing people and to be feeling good and to like, you know, you want to have spent the last penny as you cross the line. And everybody knows this, but like somehow they still don't follow it. And like, if you look at my marathon splits for all my good races, in fact, most of my races, I'm running the second half faster than the first half. Wow. And I'm very careful about not going too fast.
Well, have fun out there. Thank you for joining us. This was awesome.
Thanks so much. It was great chatting with you. You asked some amazing questions. That was really fun. And I'll see you at Tech on the Green.
As you were maybe able to imply or infer from listening to that, Nick and I recorded this before we both ran the New York City Marathon, but we did not meet up on Tavern on the Green. And I should have listened to that last little bit about the advice of not going too fast in the first half of the marathon, because that's exactly what I did. But anyway, enough about that. Here are my favorite moments from today's conversation with Nick, the things I would put on an index card if I were to try to summarize my favorite bits of wisdom or insight from that episode. One, the thing he said very close to the beginning, where he says that you have to have faith that you're making progress on your work, even if it feels like you've just confused yourself or gone backwards. I know, especially with creative work, that's something that I really struggle with, this feeling of like, I didn't get anything done, but having that faith that you got something done, even if it doesn't look like progress. Sort of like when you're chipping away at something for a very long time and you feel like your blows aren't connecting, but then you take a break and you come back and the next blow shatters everything, and it's like all those blows that looked like they weren't doing anything were actually making some progress along the way. The second thing, that idea of spending less time worrying about doing something and more time just doing the thing, and the skill to cultivate there, Nick said, is just being able to hit that on switch. So when it comes to actually doing the thing, instead of worrying about it or distracting yourself, just hitting on and doing it. And I love that he sets a timer, because that's something that's been effective for me too, just being like, all right, I'm gonna do this for 30 minutes. And then after 30 minutes is up, if I want to revisit the possibility of doing something else or I'm still distracted, then maybe I can indulge that, but just give it a set period of time to give it a chance to get yourself going. The third big takeaway was switching over to physical fitness or running, just understanding that some fatigue is mental and that you often have more than you think you have to give, but in order to access that, you got to figure out a way to forget or get beyond your limits. This is something we talked about in a recent episode. If you want to go back and listen to that, it is everything you need to know about managing fatigue. The last bullet is sort of an overarching theme of the episode about how all the different parts of Nick's life intersect, but that thing he said about getting better at running and running his fastest time started with him first admitting that it wasn't the most important thing in his life. His coach, Steve Finley, realized the same thing that Nick said he now realizes about leading people, which is that to get the most out of people, it's not by pushing them into complete commitment, but by understanding what they want, what they need, and the time they have. So that was Nick Thompson. His newest book is called The Running Ground. If you enjoyed any part of this episode today, I promise that you'll really enjoy that book, especially if you're a runner. There's a lot in there about running, but it's also this interesting dive into a deep and complex father-son relationship. So there's a lot in there for all different kinds of readers with different kinds of interests. But that was Nick. Thank you to Nick. Thank you to you, as always, for listening. If you enjoyed this show, please subscribe so you don't miss any future shows. Please rate it. And please share it with at least one other person. We'll be back next week with another episode. Until then, take care of yourselves and be excellent to each other.